Hey learners, welcome to Manifested Online Classes. So I'm Mercy Mboya. So in the previous lesson, I introduced to you the parts of speech in English. We said that the parts of speech are 8 in number, and we discussed each part of speech, giving an explanation of what the part of speech stands for or what role it plays in a sentence. I gave examples, and where necessary, we constructed sentences to show how it is used in the sentence. So we particularly talked about nouns as the first part of speech. We talked about verbs, we talked about adverbs, we talked about adjectives, we talked about pronouns, we talked about conjunctions, prepositions, and lastly, we talked about the interjunctions. So from now henceforth, from this lesson to all the other lessons, we'll be discussing each part of speech independently. So first and foremost, we're going to start with the nouns. So remember, I said the order had been arranged from the most important, like the ones that we use are very common within the language. So we had started with nouns. So that is what we're going to be talking about in our today's lesson. So we're going to be talking about the nouns. So I hope you can remember what we had said about nouns, especially the definition that we gave of what qualifies a word to be a noun. So I hope you remember that, but I'm going to remind you that we said a noun is a name of either a person, a thing, a place, a feeling, an idea, or an animal. So every word or any name that is used to define either of those things that I've talked about qualifies to be a noun. So in this particular lesson, I'll give the definition, which I've already done. And number two, I'm also going to give you the different types of nouns that we have in the English language, because we do not only have one, we have a variety. We have different types of nouns. So we are also going to be discussing those different types of nouns. And I'm also going to give the rules that guide in which instances are you supposed to use nouns? How are they supposed to be written? Do you start with a capital letter? Do you start with a small letter? And so forth. So first, I've already given the definition. So we've said, so they are names of people, places, animals, things, feelings, and also ideas. So all those words that you come across that are used to define either of these, either it's a name of a person, it's a name of a place. Like for example, we have names of cities, we have names of towns, we have names of villages. All those are nouns because they give us they represent names of places. So we also have animals, like we have cows, we have goats. All those animals that we have are their names represents nouns. We have things. We talked about pens, we talked about books, we talked about desks. We have feelings, for example, when you say that you're sad, for example, when you say that you love somebody, for example, when you're angry at somebody. All those are nouns. They are used to express the feelings that you have, So basically, that one becomes a noun. So we already have now the definition of what a noun is. So now basically we're going to be discussing through the different types of nouns that we have. So we have so the types of nouns. So the first type, we have what we call the concrete, and we also have what we call the abstract nouns. And then on to the second one, we have what we call the common and the proper nouns. And then we also have what we call the collective nouns. And then we have what we call the countable and uncountable nouns. So in general, we have 7 types of nouns in the English language. So if you notice, concrete is a class by itself, and abstract is also another class by itself. The reason why I've written them this way is because concrete and abstract nouns are related. The difference is only, there's a very slight difference between the concrete and the abstract nouns. So that means we are going to be discussing the concrete and the abstract noun together, and then go and discuss common and proper nouns also together, because the difference between those two classes of nouns is a very small difference. I will point it out as we discuss. And then the collective nouns are a unique class by itself. So we will be discussing the collective nouns independently. And then the same thing happens with these ones, countable and uncountable. So they are different, yes, because you see I've used a comma to show that this and this are not the same things. But the difference is just a very slight or a very small difference. But as we discuss, I will point out the differences. So in this particular lesson, I want us to concentrate on these 4 types of nouns. That is, we'll talk about the concrete, the abstract, the common, and the proper nouns. So first and foremost, I'm going to start, of course, with the definition. What is a concrete noun? What qualifies a noun to be a concrete noun? So we start with the concrete nouns as number 1. Remember, these are types of nouns. So as you take down your notes, make sure that you indicate this subtopic. So the first one, the concrete nouns. So the concrete nouns, in other words, remember we've said that the nouns can be names of people, names of places, animals, things, feelings, and also ideas. So in all the nouns that we have, there are some that have a physical existence. When I talk about a physical existence, I mean we have some nouns that you can see and actually touch. So for example, I can touch my hair, because this is something that all of us can see, and at the same time I have the ability to touch. When I talk about somebody, when for example I talk about a desk, that is a concrete noun because I can see a desk and I can hold it. When we also talk about a chair, it is something that you can see, and at the same time it is something that you can hold. So when we talk about the concrete nouns, basically these are those nouns that have a physical existence. So are those nouns that have an actual physical existence. So when you talk about an actual physical existence, remember we mean there are those nouns that you can, when I ask you for a chair, you can bring me a chair. When I ask for a book, you can give me a book. So all those are examples of concrete nouns. So I can give, you can write out those few examples. Especially pick out examples from your environment, the ones that you can relate to. So I've talked about books, I've talked about pens, I've also talked about your desks, and I've also talked about chair. So all these examples are things that are in your environment, and they are things that you can touch, you can see. And then now we go to the second category of nouns, which is what we refer to as the abstract nouns. So, giving reference to how I've written concrete and abstract, and by the virtue that I've said, there's only a very slight difference between these two different types of nouns. So the difference here comes, we've said concrete nouns actually have an actual physical existence. But for the abstract nouns, they do not have an actual physical existence. They are not things that we can touch, and they're not things that we can see. For example, when I can give you an example of a sentence like a famous quote that says, "Honesty is the best policy." We can write out that sentence. Honesty is the best policy? First and foremost, how many nouns can you point out from there? How many nouns can you identify from that sentence? So you can take some time before we discuss, identify the nouns that we have in that sentence. So we have two nouns. The first one is honesty. The other noun is policy. So are you able to touch honesty in a person? For example, when I say I'm honest, are you able to point out where that honesty is in me? I guess you cannot do that. Can you point out where we have a policy and point out that this is the policy or this is what we refer to as a policy? That is also impossible. So now that brings us to our definition of what an abstract noun is. So unlike the concrete nouns that have an actual physical existence, these ones, the abstract nouns, are those nouns that lack actual physical existence. So you cannot point to kindness, you cannot point to love and say this is how love looks like. You cannot point to some virtues like kindness and say that this is how kindness looks like. For example, when you say she's kind, you cannot point out to where that kindness is in that person. So that is basically the main difference that we have between the concrete nouns and the abstract nouns. So I hope that was really clear to everybody. So I want to give a brief exercise here, and then I require you to do the exercise before we discuss the exercise and move on to something different. So I'm going to give a list of nouns, and then you will be required to classify those nouns as either being concrete or abstract. And in doing so, I would like for you to draw a table. One side indicates the ones that are concrete, and on the opposite side indicate the ones that are abstract. So here is the list of nouns. So the instructions to the exercise. So the instructions, of course, is classify the following nouns into their various categories. So these are the nouns. The first noun, we have car, we have love, we have peace, we have honesty, we have and then we also have the noun respect, endurance, patience, and share. So you make sure that by the next lesson you will have completed the assignment, and I'd like for you to use a table so that it's easier for you to do the classification. So I'm just going to draw out a sample table for you so that you see what you're supposed to do. So I've said on one side you make sure you put those nouns that you feel are concrete, and then on the other side you put those ones that you feel are abstract. So a table like that, and you use good numbering, that you have one here which is the first concrete noun. I'm going to do one for you so that you know what you're supposed to do. So for example here, the first noun is car. So is car a concrete noun or is it an abstract noun? Is this something that has a physical existence? You can see it and you can actually touch it. I believe the answer to that question is actually yes. So automatically the word car becomes a concrete noun. Then we move on to the next one, which is love. Love is a noun. This is a feeling or it's an emotion. So is this something that you can touch or is this something that you can see? No, you cannot see love and you cannot actually touch love. You can only feel. So that means that love is a abstract noun. So you will do the same for all these other types of nouns, and then we'll look at them during the next lesson. So now that we through with a concrete nouns and the abstract noun, we'll move now to the next category, which is the common and the proper nouns. I have said these two nouns are different types. That is common and proper. They're not the same, as much as I might have written them in the same line, not the use of the comma. So I said the difference is slight. So that is why it is important for us to discuss the two of them at the same time, so that you'll be able to understand better. So let's now move to the next category, which is the common and the proper. I believe the nouns as a part of speech is basically very simple. If you do a lot of practice, research with your friends as you speak, use as many types of nouns as possible, and make sure that you also try to identify them. So now we've moved to the third type. So we'll first start. Number 3 will be the common noun. So as the name suggests, common. So the common nouns basically are just those nouns or those names of things that are not specific. So common nouns in nature are those nouns that are not specific. They do not specify exactly what they are talking about. So I've said common nouns are nouns that are not specific, So meaning that they are not specified. I'm going to give an example. So for example, if I give you the noun university, so you will notice for a word like university, when we talk about university, it's a noun, yes, because this is a name of a place. But are we being specific about the particular university that we're talking about? No, because we've not talked about Kenyatta University, or we've not said the University of Nairobi. We've just said university. When I talk about another noun, for example, I mention girl. I have not specified which particular girl I'm talking about. I have not said Natasha. I have not said Sheila. I have not said Mercy. I have not said Mary. I have just said girl. And girl is actually a noun, but in this case, it is a common noun for the reason that it is not specific. If I walk in here and find a group of girls and I say girl, nobody will come up here because I have not called out the specific name of a person. I have just said girl. So these are nouns that they're not specific. So in other words, we can say that they are general. So they refer to things in general. They do not specify exactly what they want to talk about or who are the particular person that is being addressed. And then now we move to the other type of noun, which is the proper noun. So unlike the common nouns which are not specific, the proper nouns are specific. Specific in the terms that, for example, when I talk about names of people, when I say Sheila, I'm being specific. If I'm calling out Sheila, I do not want to see any other person apart from Sheila. If I talk about Nairobi, I'm not talking about any other city, I'm only talking about Nairobi. If I talk about Mombasa, I'm talking about Mombasa only. If I talk about Peter, I am only talking about Peter. If I talk about Natasha, it's only Natasha. So that is the sharp contrast or the sharp difference between these two types of nouns, that for proper nouns, they are specific, or in other words, you say they are those, they are, I'm sorry about that, they are those nouns that are specific. So examples I've given names of people. For example, when you talk about Natasha, when you talk about Sheila, when you talk about New York. So these are specific names of places. So we cannot when I call out Natasha, I am being specific about the person that I want to see. So there's something else that I want you to take note in regards to the proper nouns. So if you are keen, you will note that when I write out Natasha, my N is capital. When I write out Sheila, the S is capital. When I write out New York, the N is also capital, meaning every time that you have to use a proper noun, whether it appears at the beginning of a sentence, in the middle, or even at the end of the sentence, the proper noun always has to start with a capital letter. It does not matter where it appears in a sentence. So if you do not abide by those rules and you construct in sentences, of course the sentence will be marked wrong, because you know punctuation is also key in grammar. So if you're writing proper nouns, make sure that they start with capital letters. So I'm going to do a brief summary of what we've talked about here. So we've basically discussed 4 different types of nouns. We started out with the concrete nouns. So I hope you remember what we said in regards to the concrete nouns. We said that the concrete nouns refer to those nouns that actually have an actual physical existence. And I said an actual physical existence means it is something that you can see, it is something that you can touch. So it means that something exists physically, it is there. But then when we talk about the other contrast, which is the abstract nouns, we say they are used to talk about those nouns that do not have an actual physical existence, meaning they are those nouns that you cannot touch and you cannot see. I gave examples of something like love. I said it is purely an emotion, but you cannot say you cannot see it. You cannot say this is the love, or this is the honesty, or this is the kindness. You cannot see, or this is the peace. So because of the fact that you cannot see them physically, they are abstract nouns. So we went further to talk about common nouns, and I said the common nouns can clearly be defined as those nouns that are general. They are not specific. When you use the common nouns, you're not being specific. So I said, for example, when you talk about a girl, you're not being specific about the girl that you're talking about. When you talk about boy, you're not being specific about the boy that you're talking about. I also give the example of university. When I just mention university, I have not specified which particular university I'm talking about. And then we went to the other category, which is the proper noun. So we said, unlike the common nouns, which are not specific, basically which are general in nature, the proper nouns are more specific. So more specific means proper nouns include names of people or the particular names of places. So for example, when you talk about Mombasa, I'm specific. I'm not talking about any other town or any other city. I'm talking about Mombasa. When I talk about Nigeria, when I talk about Somalia, I am being specific about the country that I am talking about. I also pointed out that for proper nouns, you have to make sure that they always start with a capital letter, whether they appear in the beginning of a sentence, in the middle, or at the very end of a sentence. They always have to start with a capital letter. So, keep practicing, look for more nouns, try classifying them, and then with practice, of course, you will you will be able to know how to classify nouns. So I'm going to give a brief assignment still on these two, on the common nouns and on the proper nouns. So I'm also going to give a list of nouns, and you will be expected to classify them into the various classes, whether it's a proper noun or whether it's a common noun. So you're going to label this as exercise 2. Remember, I already gave exercise 1. So this is going to be exercise 2 now. So the instructions are simple. Classify the following nouns into their various categories. Into their various categories. So you can use a table and try to classify those nouns into their various categories. So make sure that you think through before classifying the noun into whichever category you deem fits. So that is all for today. I hope you'll have done the assignment before we meet for the next lesson. I also hope that you've enjoyed the lesson, and thank you so much for listening. See you during the next lesson.